You see my chimp Scatter over there with the hand cannon? That is a problem for you, friend. You see, I decided a while ago I wasn't gonna just sit around while this country's torn apart by all the chaos, the dirtbag hippies, the drugs, the crime. No, 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 not on my watch. But Scatter here, hell, he just does it 'cause he gets off to it. Now you listen to me, scumbag. I promise you, Scatter's gonna pull that trigger.
Oh, fuck!
If, God damn it, Scatter, I was gonna say if he didn't talk.
Welcome to the Satellite Show, a BatmanOnFilm.com podcast. This is the podcast here at BOF where we talk about anything we want to in pop culture, sports, whatever it is, but not Batman. And so joining me on this episode of the Satellite Show, and it's been a while since there's been a Satellite Show. I was just talking with Javi about that. Javi Trujillo, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right, Bill. It's a nice gray morning in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And ready to talk some King.
Yes. So real quick, would you consider yourself, I don't want to speak for you, you consider yourself an Elvis fan, right?
Well, someone said that the world's a stage and we each
Okay.
must play a part.
Yes.
So, and fate had me playing as your co-host today.
Okay.
So yes, I would say I am an Elvis fan.
Lifelong, diehard, what level? I mean,
well, he died 2 months after I was born. So
okay.
I never got to see him live or anything like that. It was just one of those things that I always kind of grew up with.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents always listened to what was then the oldies station, which was like 50s and 60s. And,
Yeah.
you know, if Fun in Acapulco came on TV, we would watch it. It wasn't until I got into high school, for whatever reason, that I really started getting into the music and buying, and this is going to date me, buying my own cassettes for myself to listen to, like the soundtracks or compilations, you know, long before they did like the 30 number one hits where they would remix a song at the end. So, my fandom started under my own power, like when I was in high school, getting VHS movies and maybe a couple action figures or dolls. And I had a couple Elvis posters up in my room when I was in high school, and it's just kind of waxed and waned.
Yeah.
I always loved listening, you know, to Elvis, but it's a little difficult when there's no new content coming out necessarily. You know, every year they seem to kind of do some kind of re-release or remaster, and I'll pick that up. But if I need a mood lifter, putting on Elvis usually does the trick.
The reason why we're talking about Elvis, if you're wondering, we are, and you should know, because I'm sure if you found this, you can see the title with the podcast. We're going to talk about the new animated series on Netflix titled Agent Elvis. I have talked about Elvis before on this feed on one of our shows. It was a Satellite Show, I think. It might have been, I don't know if it was a Social Hour or Satellite Show. It was one of them. Social Hour is my show, so it's usually Batman stuff, but I can talk about whatever I want on that too. So, but there's a little overlap here. But I've said before, you know, I'm a lifelong Elvis fan. I was 11, almost 12 when he died in 1977. I grew up an Elvis fan. My mom was an Elvis fan. That's how I became one. I had her records from, you know, the 50s, a lot of the 50s stuff, 60s. Mm-hmm. And I just, and then especially right after he died, when there was such a new wave of Elvis mania, you know, it's weird, you know, we see that with when celebrities pass and singers especially, but I really, and I was older then. I was getting to be close to being a teenager, and I really got into like the historical aspects of
Mhm.
Elvis and how important he was to to music and whatnot. And I'm so not to go off on a tangent of a historical tangent here, but yeah, and it's like Batman. I don't remember not being an Elvis fan, you know.
Yeah.
So it's on that level. And of course, we got the movie last year, uh, Elvis. Baz Luhrmann directed. Austin Butler played Elvis, and that's what I did a show on that one previously, but um, that was like I always wanted a big screen biopic of Elvis, and, you know, something that's really done that was done right, and that movie blew me away, you know, and I was happy to see another generation of people discovering Elvis, you know, through that movie as well, and even incorporating um, modern and current artists within the soundtrack of the film
Yeah.
was really great. You know, Elvis would have
Oh,
loved that
100%.
because I mean that's what he did. You know,
Yeah.
is take music and turn it into Elvis music. So I thought it was great. So
Yeah,
not to get
not just even at the beginning of his
yeah
career, but like throughout his career. Like
yes
there's a reason why his sound changes and
yeah
why it's not just that rockabilly that you heard in
yeah
like the 50s era.
mm-hmm.
That he matured as an artist a lot.
Yes. Yes. Right. The Sun Record stuff is my favorite. I think it's some of his that's most creative period because he didn't really know what he was doing, you know, because it was new. Um, and then, you know, there's I think his bet, you know, but not thing, I think by far his best studio album ever was from Elvis in Memphis in 1969, right? You know, after it came out after the
The comeback.
comeback special. That's great. And then anyway, I'm not going to get on the Elvis tangent, but this is something when I found out about they were doing this, uh, and I read the premise that Elvis was going to be a secret agent, and I went, "Oh yeah, this is probably going to work because Elvis wanted to be a secret agent. He wanted to be a law enforcement officer. He loves superheroes. Captain Marvel Jr. I mean, that was true. If you saw the movie, Elvis was an OG comic book fan, and Captain Marvel
Yeah.
Jr. was his favorite comic book character. And you can see, you know, the '70s stage costumes were inspired by Captain Marvel Jr. So, and to know that, you know, Priscilla Presley is one of the creators and producers of it. And it was, you know,
And
pretty
one of the
much, you know,
voices too.
yeah, she voices herself, a younger version of herself, of course. But to know that she, you know, signed off on this because she is very protective of Elvis's legacy and would not have Elvis. You know, someone could have done this and it could have been a complete disaster, you know. But you take
Yeah.
that premise of Elvis being a secret agent, knowing that he wanted to be one, you know, and make it happen. It's just it's a great take on something new that's Elvis.
What were your thoughts? Because I remember I texted you when we found out about it.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts initially when you heard McConaughey was going to voice the
You know
king?
what?
Were you excited
Yeah,
because, you
I'll
know,
tell you. I did not know until that first teaser trailer dropped. And I think that's pretty much where they announced
the
it. Because
cast? Yeah.
yeah. Um, and because when they first announced the show, it was originally called Agent King, and they just
Right.
had a little logo and, you know, the image of the animated version of Elvis that you would see in the series, but they didn't have any voice cast. And I was thinking, you know, they'll have someone basically doing an Elvis impersonation, you know,
Mhm.
When I heard the trailer, watched the trailer and heard McConaughey's voice, I mean, I went, well, that's Matthew McConaughey, but it fits perfectly because it's something very cool that he's not doing an Elvis impersonation. He's got a very Texas accent,
Yeah.
which is fine by me as a native Texan. Very Northeast Texas accent, by the way, him being from Longview. But I thought after watching the entire series, I thought it fit perfectly. I was even made a note of that. I wanted to bring it up, so I'm glad you brought that up.
There's a part of me that wishes it could have been like Austin Butler, um, or that there was more of an attempt to do like an Elvis voice, like Bruce Campbell in Bubba Hotep. But those feelings quickly dissipated watching the show. Like you said, just the animation is so good and the visual they chose to represent Elvis, like it doesn't strike me as odd that this particular voice is coming out of this character model.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just something about it works and adds to the heightened reality
It
that the
does.
show lives in. And he just, oh man, he's just so cool. He just sounds so cool
Yeah, that's a
as
great
Elvis.
way to describe it. It sounds very cool. You know, if it had been someone else, and look, you got to. He's a big time actor, McConaughey. You know,
Academy
big
Award
time.
winning, right?
Yes,
Like,
and so to have his name, as starring in this show, doesn't hurt marketing purposes. For it. If it had been another big name, but someone with a Northeast accent or a Midwest accent, it wouldn't have worked. But the fact that McConaughey does have a Texas accent, it's not a Tupelo or Memphis accent, but it's you're right. It's just I thought it worked perfectly. I just didn't had any reservation I had of like, well, doesn't sound like Elvis. I think you would have come across if someone was doing the Elvis voice the whole time, it might have come across a little bit of like, what was that cartoon? And I always felt sounded like he was trying to talk like Elvis.
Johnny Bravo.
Johnny Bravo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would have just come across. I just bought in McConaughey being
Yeah.
Elvis's voice completely, that being
It's
Elvis.
it's just weird because in a weird way, it kind of grounds his performance, like grounds the show. Because as we'll get into, there's just so much like extreme uh, things going on, both in terms of like action and
Yeah.
situations and like the recent movie, like there's a good juxtaposition of actually playing Elvis music in it,
Mm-hmm.
or even showing like photographs, like actual
Mm-hmm.
photographs in some of the episodes. So it doesn't necessarily feel like he's standing apart from everything else. Like you still get like that connection to the
Yeah.
actual person, which really helps with the balance of everything.
So just to finish out the cast, of course, Matthew McConaughey is Elvis Presley. Caitlin Olsen is CC Ryder,
CC with
which,
an A.
yeah, with an E, uh, who is also a secret agent working for uh, what's what's
TCB.
TCB? Yeah,
Yeah.
TCB. We'll talk about that in a second.
Oh, it's so
Um,
good.
Johnny Knoxville's Bobby Ray, Elvis's buddy, who's not part of the Memphis Mafia.
Yeah, not
Um,
part of the mafia
yeah,
or the Memphis Mafia, to be
Memphis Mafia.
clear.
He's more of Elvis. He's a hillbilly, Mister Jack of all trades type guy. Can fly planes and I mean anything. Voiced by again Johnny Knoxville. Nicey Nash is Miss Birdie, who is Elvis's caretaker, nanny, is like adult. Even it's like he has a nanny as an adult. In this universe of Elvis, she's been with him. So he says, as you know me since I was in diapers, and these are all, CC Ryder, Bobby Ray, Miss Birdie are all fictional characters. And then there's Scatter, the chimpanzee, voiced by SpongeBob SquarePants himself, Tom Kenny. And I'll get a kick out of this because I've had people ask me on social media, why is there a chimpanzee in this show? And I went, Elvis in the mid 60s had a chimpanzee named Scatter who lived with him at Graceland, and he took him on the road to Hollywood when he was doing a movie. And apparently the chimpanzee raised 10 kinds of hell. I don't know if it's the kind of hell raised that you see Scatter do in this series, but
Probably not.
he must have been a piece of work. I mean, he's portrayed as a pot smoking, cocaine snorting prostitute. What's the word I want to look for? He is an aficionado of prostitutes and strippers, and just he's something else.
If there's a vice, he's probably into it. So.
And it's totally, in the context of the series, it totally works and doesn't come off ridiculous, And then the final member of the main cast is Don Cheadle as the commander, who is the head of TCB. Not taking care of business, but it's the organization that's recruiting Elvis as
the Control Bureau.
The Control Bureau.
Yeah.
That there is, some kind. It's a government covert operation of some sort. So that is your main cast, and then there's just a plethora of guest cast members doing characters, and I'm not gonna get all of them because there's a lot. But speaking of the episode we're going to talk about, I will mention that in just a second. But it's just it's great. I found it to be the series to be a mix for me. Like there's a Tarantino vibe very much throughout. There's a bit of Forrest Gump in it because all of these historical. Elvis is part of historical events, and historical characters are actually become characters within these episodes, are just cameos, that you see. And then visually, and I'm pretty sure they weren't inspired by it, but there was also this a little bit, as a Batman fan, a little bit of Brave and the Bold in it. Especially visually, some of the action scenes where you always see that slow motion toward the camera, still
those dramatic,
Batman punching or kicking or whatever.
Yeah,
you see that
those pauses that feel like a living comic book panel.
Did you get that from watching?
Oh yeah. That was definitely something I wanted to bring up because that was the first thing that I thought of. I mean, I'm sure there are other cartoons that done it.
Yeah,
but that Brave and the Bold is like foremost in my mind when it comes to that technique.
The kind of like, it's not rainbow, but like the orange and red kind of a spectrum behind it as the background, that kind of look that you would see in Brave and the Bold. I picked that up almost immediately. Anything else that you felt had a little vibe of something, an influence, or anything in that, what I mean?
Not to get like too deep into like future spoilers, but there's an aspect of it that reminded me of Bubba Hotep, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's a movie starring Bruce Campbell and Ossie Davis, based on a novella where Elvis didn't die in 77. That was an imposter that he had traded places with because he needed a break. And the proof of that switch got destroyed, so he had to live out the rest of his life as an Elvis impersonator. And he winds up as an old man in a quiet Texas nursing home with a gentleman who thinks that he's JFK, except he's black. And a mummy comes and is like taking out the residents of this nursing home, which is a pretty ridiculous premise. But in that movie, there are moments of just real character work, and you feel some of the regret that maybe Elvis had in his life. Like there's just some real humanity that pops up just every now and then to kind of ground everything. And with this show, you get to see, as crazy as it gets with like the spycraft and the action, there's some like real moments where Elvis's character comes through. And there's some stuff with Priscilla that they only barely hint at, some of the trouble they might have had. That kind of took me aback a little bit, because you're having like this fun time, and if you think about it, it's like, oh, like this was like a problem for them, especially considering that Priscilla signed off on it and was involved as a producer and as a voice. Like there, I can just see under the surface there's a little bit of some sadness there.
Yeah, they didn't
that
shy
doesn't
away
detract
from
the
that.
fun.
They didn't get into the whole thing, what caused the split with Priscilla and Elvis, but it could have just been just, this being fiction and how crazy it is, they could have just played up how, this perfect relationship that they had.
Yeah.
And they didn't. You saw that a little bit in the beginning, but by the time the series ends, it's a different story, and it's not done. It's not in your face and very overt. It's subtle, but you get it. For like one more thing I can think of to discuss, I love that they really did incorporate actual Elvis events.
Yeah.
There were some fictionalized Elvis events. Elvis never sang in like I did a USO concert or anything like that, but there were, real Elvis events, things that Elvis did, things that Elvis thought, that they incorporate in within all this crazy, just absolute nuts storytelling that really made it feel like, it made it feel like Elvis. And it never comes across as making fun of Elvis either.
Yeah.
It's not a parody at all.
The big things for me, those historical references are like, we start off at the comeback special, and the series ends right before the Aloha concert in '73, which it's so serialized a show. Like you can't just like randomly throw on an episode like a '70s Batman cartoon. Like there's actually a through line if you watch from episode 1 to episode 10.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much time passes between the first episode and the last one, because I was just sucked into it. But then watching the first one again today, it's like, oh wait, no, we're starting 68. Yes. By the time we're done, it's 73. So obviously those two key events, the Nixon event, which they've even made a movie about that as well.
2 movies.
Of Elvis meeting Nixon. So that was a fun to get their perspective on it. And I like how you brought up the USO tour, because the way it's worked into the show, it's like, well, maybe it did happen. Like it's done in such a way that it could have happened, but it got swept under the rug, which adds to just the fun of everything.
Yes. So what we're going to do with this episode is we're going to talk about this episode of the Satellite Show. We're going to talk about the first episode of Agent Elvis, and we're going full spoiler. So if you haven't watched it and you don't want to be spoiled, then come back and listen to this afterwards. If you don't care about being spoiled, maybe you're going, I don't know if I'm going to watch that. Well, go ahead and listen to it, because we're not going to talk about any of the other episodes. And like Javi said, there's a storyline that's told throughout the entire series. It's something you want to watch. You can't just jump in, like you said. You can't jump in and watch episode 8. You can, but you'll be lost on some of the stuff and the motivations of the characters and whatnot. So we're going to talk about episode 1 of Agent Elvis. It was titled Full Tilt. And basically, It's, as Javi said, it does start in 1968. It's set in Burbank / Los Angeles. Elvis is doing the comeback, what would be called the comeback special. They play up on the fact that it was intended to be a Christmas special, which is a true fact. Elvis wanted no part of it being a Christmas special. And I liked the way they did, played up on that, and so anyway, long story short, someone's trying to kill Elvis. And he, not sure who it is. And so it ends up with him, he gets kidnapped by this assassin who we think is an assassin at the time. Him, Bobby Ray, and Scatter. No, it was just him and Scatter, right? At that point.
Yeah.
And the Scatter. Limo. Yeah, him and Scatter leave. He had just sang, he did the recorded the Trouble part of where he sang Trouble in the 68 comeback special. And I mean, it's full garb and all that, just like the 68 comeback special. And he leaves and gets in the limo, and he's being kidnapped, and shenanigans break out. And
violent,
very
shenanigans.
Let me tell you this. This is not for kids, y'all. It is gory, it's gruesome, it's bloody, it's crude, it is the sexual innuendo, and just it's full on, straight up adult, right? Is that the best way to put it? Okay. So Elvis ends up gaining the upper hand, him and Scatter, and they take the kidnapper back to his LA home and go to interrogate him. And what we find out, Elvis is a little bit of a Batman at the beginning, because not only is he, doing his Elvis thing during the day, at night he's going out, he's a vigilante, and he's taking on various street level crime operations on his own, incognito. So what was your take on that whole thing? Because Elvis really wanted to do that shit. I mean, that's what's funny about it.
Like I knew about Nixon deputizing him.
Yeah.
And his just that he was like a fan of law enforcement and did lots of stuff with police and of course, had a lot of guns and would shoot TVs and stuff like that. So it didn't seem outside the realm of possibility that, this Elvis would go out and fight crime. And he's talking about the drugs and the hippies and how America's sick. Because especially if you watch the Baz Luhrmann movie, the late 60s were very turbulent, and it all plays into why this Elvis would, try and take matters into his own hands, and be a crime fighter. Especially, they don't really touch on the comic book aspect, but if then you feel that vibe of him trying to kind of be a hero. So
yes, I mean, there were, he was, I don't know if I want to use the word honorary, but that's probably what it is, but not in Elvis's mind. Like Shelby County, where you live, where Memphis is, Tennessee, he was a deputy sheriff, honored, but there honorary. But he had badges from all over the country as well. I mean, all over the country. And there were times reading biographies about Elvis that he would, someone maybe you're driving along in Memphis and maybe exceeding the speed limit, and all of a sudden you get pulled over by some fancy car, and out pops Elvis Presley as a doing law enforcement work, telling the person they need to slow down. He didn't want to give them a ticket. if Elvis did that. So this is a little bit of that, taking it to a new level here, this vigilanteism that Elvis is doing.
But I mean,
And
he
we,
was like 50s or 60s Batman, where he was deputized by different
yeah,
law enforcement
yeah.
agencies. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they play with that really well. And I don't
And
think we
yeah,
get into it in this episode. I think it's further down the line where you see maybe there's a reason behind that.
yeah,
So
yes.
you
So he,
definitely want to keep
yeah,
watching to see how that all plays out, or maybe where it came from.
I like the action scene. You know, he's fighting the kidnapper, kicking his ass, and then
With
but a bunch of fans are
Guitar Man, right?
watching. Yeah, Guitar
Yeah.
Man, and fans see him, and you know he's finished. He's got the guy over his shoulder, and he's bleeding, and he was like, "Oh, I'm just rehearsing for my new special, my new TV special, and you know that's fake blood right there, and that's fake whatever it is, you
Yeah.
know." And you know this
Meanwhile,
guy's
there's like an open fracture of this guy's
yeah.
arm and the bone is sticking out. And
So they bring him back. Like I said, they bring him back to Elvis's house, and Elvis goes to interrogate him, and Scatter ends up blowing his head off, you know, right in the middle of the interrogation. Elvis was like, "God damn it, Scatter!" I said, if you know, so you know, it's hilarious, and then it works into, and this is the crate. Here comes like historical real person cross paths with this Elvis. You never would have thought about it. But while he's back in on set at the special, and he goes in saying, you know, Bobby Ray says, "What happened to all the Christmas stuff?" And he said, I'm changing plans here, and we're going back straight up rock and roll, and I got Scotty and DJ coming in already, and you know this and that." And then three girls walk in, and I was like, you know, he's like, "Well, hello, you know, and can we take a picture?" It ends up being Manson family members,
yeah, which is
and
where the Tarantino part kind of
yeah,
comes in to a
yeah,
degree,
and
because you
it's
step into that alternate history,
yeah,
alternate reality of the Manson family, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But again, like that, the Manson that they portray, like the historical figure did want to have like some kind of a record career.
absolutely, yeah.
So
He hung out with the damn Beach Boys, you
yeah,
know, and there were several, you know, artists, music artists of that period that knew Charles Manson. That's a whole different conversation. But they're there to, again, they're there to kidnap Elvis, essentially. They pull out guns, or not guns, knives. And that's when we meet CC Ryder. She pops in and proceeds to, you know, kick their ass, and they run off. And so she ends up, God, I'm going to get to the whole thing. She takes off. Then they follow her to a restaurant. How they find her is ridiculous, but it's hilarious as well. I'll let you watch and find out. But I did notice. Did you see the part when Scatter is hanging out the window, following the scent of CC Ryder? There's the Planet of the Apes
yes,
billboard. Yeah,
yeah, which
which plays
kind of comes into play later.
at the
Yeah,
end. Yeah, and they find her at a restaurant, and ends up, you know, she's like, "Well, someone's trying to kill you. Blah blah blah. You're on a kill list, and um, Charles Manson wants to kill you." And so he ends up at the Spawn Ranch where Charles Manson had his
family.
family operation. It was an old abandoned movie set from back in the day. Uh, they took the girls had taken Bobby Ray. So at one point, because they had crashed into the car, and you know, and Elvis was knocked out, and then Bobby Ray. It's just crazy stuff. They're at Spawn Ranch. So what did you think about the inclusion of this? You know, here we are. This is almost like what I said, that Forrest Gump moment where Elvis is now in a real, you know, um, he's mixing it up with actual historical individual uh, at that time, where it's right before, you know, it's right before the Manson killing. So
Yeah, it sets the tone for where, I mean, it's a good pilot because it sets the tone for where the series is going
Yeah.
by like we're going to take history and then go a step to the left
Mm-hmm.
and show you, you know, a possibility. And so it makes it brings an element of surprise to it because what you think you know may not be exactly what happens. And Manson is far from, like we've mentioned earlier, he's far from the only historical character we see. Um, it
Oh yeah.
they make a few references to Robert Goulet in this episode and Elvis's hatred of him. And I don't
Yes.
know if he really felt that way or not,
He
but like
did.
that's some
I,
okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. Elvis despised Robert Goulet.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's
Not
funny.
for any not this is one of the things that I laughed hard at when I first watched this. The fact um they included Robert Goulet in it, and he's even he plays skeet with TVs, scatter throws TVs up in the air with Robert Goulet on them, and Elvis
Yeah, they're
shoots
all
them.
yeah.
Elvis, he goes, he hated it the way he sang. He goes, because he had no soul to his singing. It was generic and it was just soulless. He despised Robert Goulet. I hate Robert Goulet, and I I found that hilarious that they actually use that. And I just will say that Elvis and his attitude, his feelings toward Robert Goulet is found throughout the series. So there's just a little bit of, not going to tell you what the deal is, but it's not the last time we see Robert Goulet, uh, episode 1 here. So uh, you didn't know about that, about Robert Goulet?
No, I'd never heard that before.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It's a classic Elvis. I mean, there's been TVs Elvis shot and blew out with Robert Goulet would
Yeah,
pop up on TV. True
didn't know
facts.
that.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yes.
Like I
You
knew he
know
would
how?
shoot
Yeah.
TVs. I didn't know that there was beef with Robert Goulet. That's
Yeah.
who's voiced by Ed Helms. So if you've watched like The
Yes.
Hangover or The Office, that guy does
Yes.
a great job because he doesn't sound like himself.
No. Fred Armisen is Charles Manson in this episode. And what do you think about their whole take on Manson? He's kind of, he's got this battling personalities in his head telling him
Yeah.
things, they kind of go with, I mean, it's kind of it was a comical take on this dude.
Well, like I think they mentioned that like in the show because we know Manson and his
Yeah.
quote family, but uh, in the cartoon, like he's got his followers or whatever, but like
Mm-hmm.
there's the family that's in his head, which is like
Yeah.
4 or 5 different Mansons arguing within himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was fine. Like I thought it was funny. It added to his insanity
He
for the
wanted
show.
he wanted Elvis there, not that he didn't want to kill him, or at least one of the
Yeah,
personalities wanted him there to help him get a recording contract, is why they kidnapped Elvis. But there were another Manson in his head was telling him to kill Elvis, So it was
yeah.
just, and they actually like go in his head, and you have these different Mansons talking to each other. I thought it was hilarious.
Well, it's very Batman and Jokery, and that Joker has like distinct personalities that we've seen throughout the years, but Batman more or less is consistent. So to tie it into like Batman, like Elvis would be Batman, and Manson's kind of like this, like a Joker type character where
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what's going to happen. He's going all over the place because he's got all these different things rattling around, and it ties into that whole like comic book aesthetic when they go to the fight scenes. Like it feels like here's your hero and then this is your super villain. And not
Yes.
every
Yeah. Great
episode
point.
is like that, but it definitely gives that vibe off.
So wind this up. So basically, what it all comes down to is Elvis, CC Rider, and Scatter kicked the Manson family's ass.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Which is all, you really want
Yeah,
to see.
that's the bottom line. Elvis
Yeah.
kicks his ass, kicks their ass, and he goes back to we see him at the end, he's with Priscilla. They're at Graceland, and they're actually watching the comeback special, so it's got to be, it's December of 1968 by that time, and they're playing it, If I Can Dream. There's animated Elvis doing the whole, doing If I Can Dream, just like it was on the 68 comeback special. Then we get little flashes of what else is going on in the meantime. And that's when we find out more about hear a little bit more from the commander. We find out that the first kidnapper wasn't really a kidnapper. This was a test for Elvis.
Yeah.
From TCB, to see if he was worthy of being recruited into their organization. And of course they found out, like Scatter blew his head off. We know that CC is kind of like, she's more or less what, Javi, kind of his handler in a way. She ends up being his handler, and who's also an agent. I like the fact that Elvis really likes her leather suit that she wears in the series, and goes, "Where do you get one of those?" And she said, "Well, you can't with your, you don't have the waistline, because she's got this little tiny waistline." But it's a nod to the leather suit Elvis wore during the 68 comeback special, which we see him in the leather suit, in some of the montages there at the end. We see Manson in a wheelchair with bandages and tape, all that. So they survived. So we see that part. I did like, during the last battle where that Planet of the Apes poster came into play, is Scatter gets knocked up against a fence, and he looks over, as a horse behind him, and next thing you know, he's coming in just like the original Planet of the Apes movie. It's hilarious. So what was your what was your overall thoughts about this particular episode? And were you hooked on it from the beginning, or what was your progression of how long did it take you to get into it, or buy what they were giving us?
It's one of those weird things, because nobody's perfect. Everyone has their light sides and their dark sides, but when it comes to like Elvis, like his image was sold. Like if you saw the movie, like the Colonel was selling a specific image, especially once he got drafted, which also ties in with the show later on.
It does.
But he comes back as like this squeaky clean family Elvis, right? And if that's the Elvis you're used to or looking for, that ain't it in this show. Like it's very not family friendly. So it may take some getting used to get into it. For me, it was like, I'm not offended by it, but it did take a moment to be like, okay, this is the tone. This is what we're going for. And I think being an animation helps out tremendously, getting you into that kind of mindset. That if it was something they tried to do in like live action, it wouldn't work, because it's just so ridiculous. It is a cartoon. It didn't take me very long to really get into it, especially once you hit like the second and third episodes, because I was a little bummed in the first one, at least, that Don Cheadle's the commander is the very, very end. So if you were looking for that, there's a little bit of disappointment there. But I mean, it's Netflix and it's all out there. You're not waiting for next week, so you can just keep going and binging it like that. Like it's so easy to watch like 2 or 3 episodes in an hour, 90 minutes, and at that point you're off to the races. Like if you like comic book style action, Like obviously I do because we're here on Batman on Film. Uh, and I'm a big spy guy. Like I love me some James Bond, and there's definitely aspects of that because the commander's like his M. Howard Hughes is like Elvis's Q
Oh,
in a
okay. That
sense.
is, I don't want to spoil that. I'm literally
But
Howard
he's
Hughes
a
is a
supporting character.
character in this series, and I'm telling you, the writers are brilliant. Some of the stuff they
Yeah.
came up with. I'll let you find out yourself. Not you, Javi, but you all listening. You find out why Howard Hughes peed in mason jars. There's a actual
Oh my
purpose
God.
to it.
Yeah.
It's you know,
It's
I was, look, I went into it knowing I would probably like it because I knew just, Javi, I fancy myself a amateur Elvis historian. If
true.
you didn't know that, I knew Elvis, how much he loved superheroes and wanted to be a secret agent and wanted to be a law enforcement officer as well. I knew Elvis's humor from reading about him. Elvis Elvis tended to have some could have some crude, off what's the word I'm looking for here? Not PC type of humor at times. Uh he loved like Monty Python, and
Yeah.
Monty Python is very ridiculous. He liked uh the Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers. So there's some of that in here as well, just
Yeah.
the absurdity to it. So,
Yeah.
uh,
It doesn't take itself seriously.
no,
There are moments of some seriousness to it. And you would say maybe even some character arcs a little bit, but especially, and without saying anything, just the way that it ends too, like it's so out there, but in
yeah,
such a good way. And it's like you always say with like when we're leading up to a Batman movie, like enjoy the ride.
yeah,
From episode 1 to episode 10, this show is a ride with a great soundtrack because it's not just Elvis music, which already makes it great,
mm-hmm,
but was it Tyler Bates and someone else like provides like this rock and roll spy twang.
mm-hmm,
I can't quite categorize it, but like
yeah,
it's a great, oral experience. And John Varvatos, who's a
yes,
fashion designer,
yes,
does all the looks for Elvis. And
yeah,
some are very historical because there's
mm-hmm.
that precedent there, but like everything just the character model just looks fantastic.
Well, he looks super cool in this,
Yeah. Yeah.
throughout. Uh, Elvis is the way he's portrayed, Matthew McConaughey. He has some one-liners at times that are funny, but he's
Yeah.
also very serious, and he's like the straight man, where you have CC and Bobby Ray and Scatter are just they're the comedy, the straight up comedy elements at times. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed this episode one. It's one of my favorites. Just the fact that I was telling my son Micah, I said, "You're going to watch Agent Elvis?" I said, "We got to at least skip look, watch episode one." And I said, "Elvis kicks the Manson family's ass." He said, "What?" And I said, "Yes." And he laughed and said, "Okay,
Yeah.
I'm watching." So just that's the premise. That's what this show is about. It's
Yeah.
Elvis kicking the Manson family's ass and getting recruited by the TCB organization. And you have a crazy chimpanzee and a bunch of violence and crude language, and it's funny as hell. That's it. That's what I got right there.
Yeah.
So, with that, any just non-spoiler overall, and you've kind of done this already, so I'm not asking you to repeat yourself. Just your overall thoughts about the series in general, and maybe for those who haven't seen it yet, especially.
It's something that could have gone horribly, horribly wrong, and instead went near perfectly right.
Yeah.
And this is, Sony Pictures Animation, who did, Into the Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
So
Animation's great.
It's not that type of animation, but it's really good animation.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clean looking, and the character models like fit the world that they're trying to sell you on. And it's just such a fun ride. I can't stress that enough. It's not an Elvis you've seen before in anything else, but it also kind of fits just perfectly for what it should be. And like I said earlier, like it's so outlandish, but then there are moments that kind of take it down to earth a little bit, and it just makes for a more rewarding experience.
I have fingers crossed that there is a sequel season to this. I'd love
I hope so.
another round of it. I will say it's the way the series ends leaves that as a possibility. So
yeah,
I'm hoping people are watching it enough to where give us another episode. I want some more. I want me some more Agent Elvis. Like you said, it starts at 68, comeback special, ends right before in Hawaii, and just some hints of things you'll see throughout. I mean, Richard Nixon, the Apollo 11 moon landing, Howard Hughes. What other historical people am missing here? I mean, there's just a ton of them. Dean Martin shows up. I mean, he's in
Sammy Davis Jr.
Tiny Tim of all people. Of course, Robert Goulet is throughout. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Yeah. All right, so we'll leave it with that. I think we covered it pretty well. With that, plug whatever you'd like, sir.
Well, as always, you can find me on batmanonfilm.com, where I am reviewing Catwoman. Just wrapped up Gotham City Year One. If you haven't read that by Tom King, that is a must-own book. Like, for me, it stands right up there with Batman Year One. And it's about the idealized version of Gotham City and how it became the city that created Batman, as told through the eyes of Slam Bradley. And I've also got Batman: The Adventures Continue, season 3, which isn't a cartoon. It's a DC comic book that is set in the world of the Bruce Timm animated series. And then personally, I launched my own YouTube channel. It's called The Flash, Up to Speed with Wally West. And I am going issue by issue through his series that started in 1987, and just taking it one issue at a time, kind of doing a mini review show. And then as things come up, I'll be talking about them too, what's going on in the current books, and obviously thoughts on the movie and the trailer as we get closer to that. And I even did a statue review for the Tweeterhead Flash statue that just came out.
Cool.
So I've got 2 episodes up there right now, and obviously much more to come because I'm just getting started with it. So I hope you'll join me over there on YouTube.
Very good. I gotta go back to the Agent Elvis one more time.
Of course.
But in addition to McConaughey, who stood out? What cast member stood out for you? Anybody in particular?
I mean, it's got to be like Don Cheadle. I mean, he's Don Cheadle, and his boss character is just so like over the top, and a lot of the humor comes from how he runs the agency. And he's got like not a field agent, but he has like an assistant that's kind of like his comic relief that he puts through the ringer a little bit. But I mean, everyone is really good in this show.
They are. I thought Caitlin Olsen was a
Yeah.
standout as CC
She was
Rider.
also excellent. Yeah.
And a lot of it, I got to say, I got to just give the writers credit for the lines, the dialogue they came up with. There's some some witty, sharp, witty humor. What's the closest thing? I mean, this is really something. I mean, it's very Adult Swim, little Archer, vibe to it as well.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, if you're listening,
I
please check
forgot.
it
Like,
out.
there's
Yeah.
Timothy Leary.
Timothy, yes.
Has an important episode
Yes.
in the show. Which how that even went through with everything with Priscilla's involvement was just like, wow, we're going
Paul
here.
McCartney shows up.
Paul McCartney.
It's just
Voiced by Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg. It is,
yeah.
The people who will pop up, and at the times they pop up, and then the roles they play, are fantastic. I mean, I still laugh hard just the fact that Howard Hughes is basically Elvis's Q.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. Even the guy that claimed he picked up Howard Hughes, and Howard Hughes left all his fortune to him. Melvin, I don't forget his last name. This dude shows up at one point. There's that movie Melvin and Howard, and that's that guy. It's just got to watch it. I mean, that's
I mean,
highly
the fact
recommend
that every time we bring up something else, like if you're listening to this, like Bill and I are just smiling the whole way through.
Yeah.
Every time we talk about an aspect of the show, because it's so much fun.
It is. That's a good way to end it right there. So with that, just go to Batman on Film. You can check out all my stuff there, batman-on-film.com. You can find my social media links. You can. We're celebrating the 25th anniversary of BOF. I'm giving away a T-shirt a month for the rest of the year. I'm already giving one away for March. I'm giving one away. I mean, the April one is right now. So if you go to Batman on Film, you can check out how to enter that one. There's a couple of BOF trivia questions that you have to answer and get them right to be eligible for the drawing. And anyway, that's it. That's all I got. Thanks for listening. Give Agent Elvis a go. I promise. Even if you're not an Elvis fan, you'll enjoy this. If you like witty, smart, quick, fast dialogue, and with a very adult, violent theme, you probably like this quite a bit. So with that, announcer Rachel will take us out, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Batman on Film Satellite Show, BOF's non-Batman pop culture podcast. Follow the show on Twitter @BOF Show. Follow BOF on Twitter @The Batman on Film. For all of Team BOF, I'm announcer Rachel. Authoritative, definitive, the original Batman on Film, established in 1998.